Good afternoon and welcome. Federal funding for infrastructure in Native communities across the country has long lagged behind the need. From housing to clean water access to surface transportation, substandard infrastructure continues to impact the everyday lives of Native Americans. Last year, tribal organizations representing more than 580 tribes from across the country wrote to Congress detailing the unmet infrastructure needs of their communities across almost every sector and urging development of an Indian Marshall Plan to address these inadequacies. We listened and we acted. Thanks to bipartisan leadership of many on this committee, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act contains more than $11 billion in dedicated resources for Native communities to improve crumbling roads and bridges throughout Indian country, provide tribes with access to adequate water and sanitation, enhance broadband services for Native communities, and strengthen tribal climate resiliency, among other critical infrastructure priorities. Today, we will examine the implementation status of those provisions 6 months after the law has passed. We will hear from federal agencies in charge of this historic federal investment and learn how such investments are poised to deploy and improve infrastructure in Native communities across the country. The bipartisan infrastructure law is just the first step to address the poor infrastructure conditions in Native communities. Tribal hospitals, schools, detention facilities, and other critical infrastructure are top of mind. And for Native Hawaiians in particular, we still have a lot of work to do. And so I'm pleased to announce that the committee will hold a field hearing in Hawaii, the first in more than 10 years, to continue our work to ensure equitable access to federal infrastructure resources for Native Hawaiians. I'd like to extend a warm welcome and aloha to Mr. Yoshimi and to our other witnesses joining us today, and I look forward to your testimony and our discussion. And I will turn it over to my friend, the Vice Chair, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I know it's in here somewhere. There it is. To our witnesses, thank you for being here this afternoon. We appreciate it. Chairman Schatz, appreciate the opportunity that we have before the committee to focus on this significant measure, this infrastructure bill that was passed into law last year. I spent a lot of time last year working to advance this, to make sure that we were able to get it over the finish line, but now we're in the harder stage, and that is implementation and ensuring its success. And that starts with robust federal oversight of the federal agencies charged with the extraordinary responsibility of implementing the law, which in many cases involves setting up brand new programs and ramping up existing programs at a much larger scale. So it's clearly no easy task. I want to extend my thanks to the 4 federal agencies that are represented here today, and an appreciation for the participation in the Federal Grant Symposium that I hosted in Anchorage last month. I also want to thank Nicole Baremo and AFN for your contributions. The in-person participation to help tribal, state, local leaders begin to navigate this massive new law was pivotal to the success of the event that we had. I'm hopeful that we were able to really develop some good partnerships so that as these programs and the grant opportunities come together, Alaskans know who to call and can begin to prioritize in that way. So much that is included within the opportunities here. And it was even before the infrastructure bill where we saw federal resources coming together on broadband. What we worked to build to create the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Grant Program, funding that at $1 billion through our 2020 year-end appropriations, and then the COVID-19 relief bill. We built on that with the infrastructure law, not only building out the broadband, but everything else that came with it. As we're seeing with tribal broadband and many other programs funded in the law, successful implementation is going to require the interagency coordination, robust tribal consultation, intergovernmental collaboration at all levels, and the development of a workforce that includes members of the local Native community. Many of the comments and questions that we picked up from Alaskans and Native leaders have two themes. The first theme is optimism about the unprecedented level of funding, but the second theme is a concern about missing out on this once in a generation opportunity. So I'm pleased that we've got these federal agencies to testify about how they're going to ensure that the bipartisan infrastructure law will in fact meet the needs across Indian country. Where grants are competitive, technical assistance will be paramount to making sure areas of highest need are not left behind. After 2 years of the pandemic, many of our tribal administrators and our Native leaders, they're maxed out, they're stretched thin. And so I'm going to be very interested in hearing how the administration is taking an all-of-government approach and making tribes aware of all of the relevant opportunities. Again, I want to welcome our witnesses, not only on this panel here in present with us, but also those who are virtually. Particular shout out and welcome to Nicole Baremo. She's the Executive Vice President General Counsel for Alaska Federation of Natives. And again, I mentioned that AFN's been working really hard to help Alaska Natives navigate the many federal and state agencies that are distributing funds and providing services. So thank her for participating, and I will look forward with great interest to the testimony from both panels today.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We'll now introduce our panelists. We have Mr. Wizipan Garriott, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs at the Department of Interior. Ms. Elizabeth Fowler, Acting Director of Indian Health Service, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Mr. Timothy Hess, Associate Administrator for Federal Lands at the Federal Highway Administration and the U.S. DOT. And Adam Geisler, Division Chief, Tribal Connectivity and Nation-to-Nation Coordination, National Telecommunications and Information Administration. I want to remind our witnesses that your full written testimony will be made part of the record and would encourage you to confine your verbal remarks to 5 minutes or less. And with that, welcome, Mr. Garriott. Please proceed.